to the May meeting 2016 of iMug. It's a pleasure to have you here. Interesting topic tonight. I'm really interested in iBeacons because I've got a conference I'm on a committee for in Queensland, and I'm trying to convince them that they should put iBeacons into the conference facilities so that we can track the attendees and push them information about updated information, but they are somewhat reticent. But maybe after tonight, and I see the YouTube video tomorrow, or when it goes up, then I might be able to convince them. So welcome. And I'm really interested in this talk. Ian will do your introductions in a moment. I want to welcome anyone who's new tonight. We've got a couple of guys here. Hello. Welcome. So I'm going to turn it over to Ian, who is our maitre d', so to speak, of for all the presentations, to do the formal introduction. So welcome everyone. Hope you have a great time tonight.
Well, thank you, Liz. This is a topic I know absolutely nothing about, iBeacons. I really am totally ignorant, so anything that you say, I'm learning. So, we have two people that I'd like to introduce. One is Tyson, who is the developer of apps with iBeacons. That's right. And our other one, the people won't be able to see at this stage, but welcome Chris, who is a co-founder of the organisation Clipped. Is that the right pronunciation? Yeah. Now, those of you who dutifully have read through the spiel on the web and have done their homework will be well informed about iBeacons. Welcome very much to all of the gentlemen there, and of course yourself.
Thank you very much, Ian.
Thanks, Tyson.
Cheers. I've just lost my slide, so hopefully when I turn this back on, we're all good. Perfect. Well, thank you, very, very kind introduction, Ian. Thanks everyone for coming out tonight. The title of this presentation that I'll be giving this evening is A Crash Course in iBeacon Technology. So hopefully a lot of you will get a bit of information out of tonight. For some of you that might have read it up on the topic beforehand, hopefully this gives you an opportunity to solidify any of that. And also I encourage any questions to be asked throughout the presentation. So fire away, and yeah, hopefully this is very informative. So my name's Tyson Bradford. I'm mobile lead at Clip. And Clip is an organisation that provides digital services to a wide range of clients. We do websites, we do digital marketing, SEO, SEM, and in recent years we've done a lot of app development. We have offices here in Melbourne. We've got one up in Brisbane and one in Sydney. And altogether we have about 20 employees at the moment. So we're very entrenched in the digital space, and one of the things that we're really big on at the moment is new technologies. So iBeacons, when they came along, were something that we had to get involved with. So what do we know about iBeacons? You know, who am I to stand in front of you tonight and tell you what's what? We've been working with the technology since last year. About June, we picked up our first iBeacon project. Before then, we'd been playing around with the technology, but we actually got to sink our teeth into something real for a client in June. We managed to deliver the biggest rollout of an iBeacon solution in Australia to date for the same said client. That rolled out around November of last year, and that was distributed to 70 plus retail stores Australia-wide. Most of them were in Queensland, where I'm from and where I work out of. But they also had stores, retail stores in New South Wales, and they had a single store in Melbourne, just down the road in Collins Street, I believe. We also have 4 apps on the app stores, so on Google Play and also on the iOS App Store. One of which is primarily for developers to aid them in their own iBeacon projects. And we also have another one for end users, which we've developed as a bit of fun, but also to kind of test the limits of the technology. And I'll talk about these two later on in the presentation. So jumping straight into it, what are iBeacons? I thought the easiest and the quickest way for those of you who are unfamiliar with the technology is to quite simply show you, to start off with, what they actually are. So this here and these white things here, these are all iBeacons. As you can see, they come in many different shapes and sizes. There's no one single provider of these, and that's based solely on the manufacturer. And what these devices do is they emit a tiny Bluetooth signal constantly. And this signal can then be received by smartphones and other devices such as laptops. What this does is this allows smartphones and mobile devices to receive some sort of micro-location context as to where they are in the world. So if I'm walking down the street and I have an iPhone, then potentially if I come into contact with one of these iBeacons, my iPhone can register that and then do some predetermined task. So what this does is it allows a whole heap of new applications to mobile apps which have been previously unachievable. And it's really exciting stuff. As I've said, they come in a whole heap of different shapes and sizes. iBeacons themselves, the protocol, was developed by Apple and is still owned to Apple to date. And this was released with iOS 7 back in September 2013. And it was done so quite discreetly, I must add. There wasn't a big hurrah when they announced the technology. It kind of came in swiftly and quietly, and has since then built quite a bit of momentum as developers have got behind it and started applying it into their apps. Just quickly, to clear up some confusion, so anyone that has done a bit of research prior to this might have found a few conflicting terms and terminology. So just to clear that up, iBeacons is strictly an Apple trademark. So they own that terminology, and they also own this icon, which you might see on certain iBeacon products and on websites and stuff like that. The iBeacon trademark applies strictly to the software protocol that the Bluetooth runs on. And I'll delve into that a bit more further on, but it's important just to know the distinction between the iBeacons that we call these iBeacon devices, but strictly speaking, it's the Bluetooth software that actually is called iBeacon by Apple. Because there's a bit of confusion and because this technology is kind of run away a bit lately, a lot of people in the industry will refer to the whole technology as iBeacons. So the devices, the apps that run iBeacon compatible software, and also the Bluetooth signals, they'll refer to that as all iBeacon, and they'll also just call it beacons. So if any time in the presentation I flip between the two, there's no good reason for it other than that's just what the industry has adopted. And it's also important to note that Apple don't manufacture any of the hardware devices, so you won't see any Apple iBeacon devices like this in any stores. They haven't shown any real interest to date in doing so. So all of the iBeacon devices are manufactured and distributed by third-party suppliers. So yeah, to give you a bit more of an example of some of the devices that are out in the market, this one's manufactured by a company called Estimote, and they're quite arguably the most popular amongst the iBeacon and developer community. They're a company out of Poland, and the price, they're about $35 per beacon, obviously depending on the exchange rate at the time. And that doesn't include shipping. So all units will come over from Poland, and you'll have to factor in shipping to all of those costs. This particular beacon are extremely reliable. They don't have a replaceable battery, so the unit is actually fully sealed all the way around. And the lifespan on the battery is about 2 years. So yeah, $35 is getting you about 2 years worth of beacon signal. Another one that we've worked with some of our projects is from a supplier called Blue Cats, which is these ones here actually. So they're an Aussie company. I think they've moved office over into San Fran recently, but they were started here in Australia. These ones actually have a replaceable AA battery, 2 AA batteries in the back. With a single set of them, you're looking at a lifespan between 6 months and 2 years. These particular devices, you can actually tune the gain on the signal. So you can actually turn the volume, as it were, up or down, and that will subsequently affect the battery life. And if you're wanting to purchase some of these, they're going to cost you about $30 a unit. Just quickly, other popular devices in the market. There's Gimbal, which is produced by a company called Qualcomm, quite famous in America. There's Contact IO. And then there's also a multitude of white label beacons, which you can purchase from sites like Alibaba and eBay. If you search iBeacon or Beacon into Alibaba, you'll literally get thousands and thousands of results. Those normally vary in price between $1 or $2 up to about $20. And as you'd expect, you get varying levels of quality in that range. We've tested quite a lot of these beacons and have found some reasonable ones with decent lifespans and decent sizes, and they've only costed about $6, including shipping, which is quite reasonable. Okay, so now that I've quickly covered what beacons are and what iBeacons are, I'll start delving a bit more down the technology and discuss how they actually work. So the main guts of iBeacon technology, the main engine, as it were, is Bluetooth. And in particular, a variant of Bluetooth called Bluetooth Low Energy. Bluetooth Low Energy came about from the engineers over there that wanted to create a Bluetooth variant that was ultra low in power consumption. Like with the beacons, there's a little bit of confusion about the correct terminology to use when talking about Bluetooth Low Energy, because it has a few names, and they're all official names actually, all trademarked. Some of these are Bluetooth Smart, Bluetooth LE, and simply BLE. Originally, Bluetooth Low Energy was an offshoot of the main Bluetooth stack, but they have obviously realised the importance and the potential in the ultra-low power consumption, and so they've actually reintegrated Bluetooth Low Energy, the Bluetooth Low Energy back into the core Bluetooth stack as of version 4.0. So any device that says Bluetooth 4.0 compatible or above will inherently work with Bluetooth Low Energy. This slide is going to be the most technical slide in the whole presentation. So if you can get through this one, we're in the clear. So the differentiation between Bluetooth Low Energy, so the main engine behind iBeacons, and the iBeacon protocol itself, is simply just the message format of the Bluetooth data that's being sent by the devices. So each Bluetooth device, or each beacon device, pardon me, will send continuous packets of Bluetooth data, just on repeat, so ping after ping after ping, they'll just send out this Bluetooth packet. And these packets here can be shown in this schematic here on the left. So this yellow block of data, which is being sent out continuously by the iBeacons, has this section here called the PDU, or the Protocol Data Unit. Within this section is the payload, or the data section of that particular packet. And then this data is shown by this schematic here. I'm not sure if you can read any of that, but I'll read it out anyway. So within the data, so within the payload of the Bluetooth signal that's being sent continuously, we have these 5 subsections of data. The first subsection here is called the iBeacon prefix, and basically this is a universal iBeacon identifier which is the same for all devices that are iBeacon or classified as iBeacon. And basically this section here, this section of data, is what determines a Bluetooth device to be classified as an iBeacon. So if I see a Bluetooth signal coming and it's got this particular iBeacon prefix associated with it, straight away I can tell that, okay, this is supposed to be iBeacon data that I'm looking at. The next three blocks of data that you'll get in a Bluetooth packet from an iBeacon are all identifiers. The first of which is the proximity UUID. The second is the major, also known as a major ID, and then the third is the minor ID. And all of these are unique identifiers or combine to make a unique identifier for that particular device. So you can basically think of the combination of the UUID, the major ID and the minor ID to act similarly to a MAC address, which you would find on a network device. The final bit of information that an iBeacon will send is this TX power. And what this is it's a power signal rating of how strong the signal should be that is being emitted by the device from a 1 metre distance at a given receiver. It's basically a gain or a scale factor that's preset on the beacon. But it's very important for applications which I'll go into later, determining exactly how far you might be from one of these devices. And all of this combined, so these 5 subsections of the Bluetooth packet is what Apple has developed and is what is probably known as the iBeacon protocol. So just to give you a quick idea on how these identifiers work, so back on the previous slide, the proximity UID, the major ID and the minor ID. The estimate beacons will ship with a default setting similar to this. So a proximity ID will be this large string of numbers and letters, which becomes the main identifier of that beacon. And then the default shipping for the estimate major ID and minor IDs are normally trivial. A lot of developers won't actually use these major and minor IDs. And a lot of you probably don't understand why there is 3 IDs in the first place. And it's basically all down to convenience. So I think Apple did a bit of thinking ahead of time into the applications that this technology would bring. This table here is actually an excerpt from one of their official documentations. I haven't referenced it, so forgive me for that. But basically it allows developers to conveniently group iBeacons into certain sections and subsections, or categories and subcategories. So the example that they give in their documentation here is for a department store that wants to deploy beacons. This department store has a few locations. So they have San Francisco, they have Paris, and they have London. So to begin with, they set their UUID, which in most cases is the main ID of the beacon device. They set this to some ID that's specific to the company or specific to the use case. They then use the major ID to distinguish between which location the beacons will actually be residing in. So for example here, the San Francisco location, all of the beacons there should be associated with a major ID of 1. Paris will have all major IDs as 2, etc. If you wanted to break this down even further, then that's where you can use the minor ID. So in this example, they have a clothing section in the department store, they've got housewares and they've got automotive. And so they've associated a particular minor ID with each of those sections within the store.
What's the breakup of minor? How many different characteristics can you have?
Yep, so for the major and the minor IDs, it's just an integer number. You can have anything between 0 and I think it's 63,000 or so. So there's plenty there to work with. So if you were worried about having a unique ID for every single unit, 63,000 by 63,000, you're not going to run out of beacons. So that's not a worry. Yeah, the examples here are quite simple. But yeah, you've got a lot of freedom there with those IDs. So moving on now from the actual devices themselves and into the applications that make use of these signals. I just want to reiterate just once more that the beacons, so the devices themselves, are purely emitting the signal. They don't receive any signal. There's no brain as such in these things. They basically will send out their IDs, which says, okay, this is me. They'll send out the iBeacon prefix, which says I am an iBeacon. And they'll send out the power signal so the apps can determine how far away the signal is coming from. But that's all they do. They just do that continuously until the batteries die or someone takes them out. They'll just continuously send that, normally at a rate of 10 hertz to 1 hertz. So the apps are what takes that signal and does something useful with it.
Presumably they have an on-off switch.
Some of them don't, actually. Most of them don't have an on-off switch. For instance, these ones, the blue cats, there's no on and off switch. So if you want to stop them from emitting, you just pull out the batteries. I think that's by design because most of the time there's not a lot of harm in the signal just going, because it's running on the Bluetooth low energy. It's not wasting any battery as such. These things run for years on single AA's. So yeah, the only reason you'd want them off is if you really didn't want anyone to pick up a signal. So the apps what handle all of the logic. So if I want some sort of action to occur, if I come into a range of a beacon, so if I want a notification to pop up on a screen, or if I want to provide some analytics somewhere to a backend saying a person has entered a specific region, then this won't happen unless there's an app that's doing all of the legwork there. Just quickly, I'll scoot through some of the minimum specifications that are required for this technology to work in the first place. So if you want to hook up iBeacons to an iPhone app or an iPad app, you'll need to be running iOS 7 or above. You'll also need a device that's got the Bluetooth low energy chips in them, and these are anything equal to or greater than an iPhone 4S, iPad 3rd Gen, iPad Mini, and iPad Touch 5th Gen. You can also connect to the iBeacon signals using your Mac, but you'll need to have the Bluetooth low energy chip installed, and you'll also need OS X Mavericks. On the mobile devices, you'll need to have Bluetooth turned on. So iBeacons aren't able to skirt around any of the operating system privileges or anything like that. If someone doesn't have their Bluetooth switched on, then they won't be able to receive that signal. Again, you need a custom app to be able to do something with the signal once it's been received. And this is nearly always going to be a custom application that's been built from the ground up. There is a native app on iOS called Passbook. Some of you might have used it to store flight tickets or have coupons and stuff like that. I won't be speaking too much about Passbook applications tonight. More than happy to afterwards if anyone's interested. But to me, they're not that interesting. The custom apps are where you can start doing really cool stuff. And of course, Apple being very tight on their security and privacy, you have to allow the app that's communicating with the beacons to have access to location services. So anyone that's got an iPhone or an iPad might have seen a security prompt similar to this. That's a system prompt asking if you are happy for this app to have access to location data, which is essentially what beacon access is. It's the same prompt you'll get for an app that wants to use GPS, but they've just given it the same security preferences in that regard. Just quickly on Android, I don't know if anyone's really interested here at iMug about Android, but just for academic sake, I'll run through it quickly. So if you've got an Android device, you'll need Android 4.3 or above. Again, you'll have to have a Bluetooth low energy enabled device, and you'll have to have Bluetooth turned on to get the signal. Again, you'll need the custom application to do something with the signal once it's hit the device. The problem with Android is that obviously because it's an Apple technology, they're kind of playing catch up in a lot of regards, and they don't actually officially support the protocol. Despite this though, there is a lot of third-party frameworks that have been developed by external developers for this application, so you can use a lot of well-tested frameworks and libraries to get it up and running on Android, but it's not officially supported. So if you have a problem, then going to Android and complaining about it's not going to help you at all. And actually on Android devices, there's still a lot of known bugs regarding the Bluetooth low energy stack itself. So communications with BLE has proven to have some difficulties on Android devices. Sure.
As far as the beacon's concerned,
Yep.
it doesn't care whether it's Android or iOS, does it?
That's correct, yep. So it's just sending out the signal. This is me, I'm an iBeacon, and then, yeah, all the rest is handled by the device, the mobile devices. That's right. Up until now, some of you might have already made the connection that a technology similar to this already exists in GPS. GPS is quite good at telling us where we are, and we can program apps that take advantage of that and perform certain actions based on our location. But there are a few inherent flaws in GPS technology which beacons are much better for its application. A big one of that is power consumption. So anyone that's ever left a GPS running, Google Maps open for too long, you'll notice that it completely drains the battery within half an hour to an hour. And that's just the nature of GPS chips. They're very power intensive. And as we've already discussed, beacons run on very low power requirements. Another big one for beacons against GPS is the ability to use them indoors. So GPS, you will need a pretty good line of sight up to the GPS satellites that are flying over our heads right now for them to work. If you're inside of an office building, or if you're down in a car park or somewhere where you're not getting that line of sight up to the satellites, then your accuracy is going to be quite degraded. You're not going to be able to get, within a couple of meters of your actual location. It's going to bust out to, anywhere between 20 and 100 meters, depending on how far removed you are from the satellite signals. Beacons, on the other hand, you just need one of the devices within line of sight, and you're good to go. So I'm going to speak now just about how the applications themselves receive the Bluetooth signal from the beacons, and what we can actually do with that information. So there's two main types of ways or channels which the apps can get their beacon data from the signal that's being emitted. One of the biggest ones, or probably the most popular one, is called region monitoring. Region monitoring acts in a way such that once you get into a region where you are receiving the Bluetooth signal from a device, the operating system will give you a ping to the application saying, I have entered a region, a beacon region. At that point in time, you can tell which region you've entered, but that's all the information you get. You just know, okay, I have entered, or I have come close enough to a beacon that I'm now seeing a signal. Similarly, you also get a notification to an application when you exit that same region. So if I have come within a certain region of a beacon, and then I walk out to an extent that I'm no longer seeing any of the signals anymore, then the operating system will tell the app, okay, I'm no longer receiving a signal, and now you can perform an action based on this.
The boundaries, do they vary, or are
Yep.
Yeah.
So the boundaries will vary depending on the signal strength of the device. And that's primarily down to, I guess, the PCB board that it's built on, so what power rating the signal is being emitted at. And that's quite related to the battery size. So normally the bigger battery devices, so the Blue Cat's one for instance, that's got a range of about 30 to 50 metres. And that's running the two AA batteries, and that's probably on the largest side of the scale. These little ones here that we have, they run on a little coin battery, so a little CR2032 battery, and their range is probably more between 10 and 20 metres. So the region monitoring can happen when the app or the phone is actually in locked mode. So you don't have to have an application open or running for the operating system to register when you come in and out of these regions. And this is particularly important if you want to do things like show a message on the lock screen, similar to a push notification, or when you get a notification when you get an SMS, you'll get a notification with a message and a title on it. You can do the same thing with beacons. So I can pre-program a beacon to say, hello, welcome to iMug, and if I got close enough to that beacon, then I would get that message on my lock screen, given that I had an app that was already pre-installed on my device. That's correct, yeah. So the app can be in the background, or it can be not running altogether. The operating system knows which apps are looking for which beacons, and what they'll do is if they register that they've come into a region that a particular app is looking for, they'll wake that app up. So if it's in the background, it'll quickly bring it to the foreground. If it's not running at all, it'll quickly start it up. You've got a little bit of time to process some data. I think with iOS, you've got about 10 seconds. So in that 10 seconds, you can normally do quite a lot. You can hit a web server, or you could show the notification on a lock screen, or a lot of other things. But yeah, that's the key one with region monitoring, is that all of this can happen in the background. So just a quick example of what I've been talking about. So if this is a beacon here in the middle, and this is the range here, if I come within the range at its most extreme point, then I'll be able to get a notification saying that I've entered this particular region. If I hang around this region for a little bit and then decide to get on my way and leave, then I'll get the exit notification. So the examples I was giving before with the beacons using the different identifiers, so the proximity ID, the major ID and the minor ID, these come in handy when you want to set up a system of beacon locations and regions. So without them, it would be quite difficult to have two or more beacons that shared a single range, essentially. So in this example here, if I wanted to come into this range, I would get an enter notification. If I crossed over this boundary just here, I would get another enter notification. If I cross this boundary, I would get an exit, and then I'd get another exit as I passed through here. But because I'm able to set up these collections of beacons, I can look for those collections when I'm getting my notifications, whether I've gone in and out of a region. So in this case here, I can set up beacons that create an extended region, and this can occur with any number of beacons. You could have 2, you could have 100, and this is really good for applications that cover a really wide area. So for things like football stadiums or shopping centres and stuff like that, you're not constantly going in and out, in and out, in and out of regions. You'll simply enter one side and then come out the other once you get far enough from the range of the beacons as a collection. The second major application that beacons use to communicate with apps is called ranging. So ranging is more of a continuous communication form between apps. So my app, if it's open and it's running, I can actually get a continual stream of beacon information, and that information will include which beacons I'm within range of, and it'll also give me an approximation of the distance between my device and the beacon that's sending the signal. So this happens on iOS about once every second. So once every second, I'll get a refreshed list of all the beacons that I'm close to and how far away they are. This distance is given using the RSSI signal, so the received signal strength indicator. It's a tongue twister. And that's calculated, again, using that TX piece of information from the Bluetooth packet. So based on how far away I should be, is determined using the gain. So at 1 metre, I'm supposed to be receiving a certain signal strength. I then can compare that to the actual signal strength that I'm seeing from the device, and then based on that, I can interpret, what approximate distance I am from a beacon. I think I covered this already, but just to reiterate, ranging, so getting the constant feed of beacon information, this can only occur whilst the app is running in the foreground. This isn't true for Android. Android, you can pretty much do whatever you want with a lot of this stuff. But for iOS, that's the limitation placed by the operating system. So to quickly cover a few shortcomings of the technology, and a lot of these have been seen and noted by us internally and also shared across the industry of developers that have used the technology to date. The distance calculations that you get in the last example of ranging, they're quite crude. You can normally be testing a device and getting a distance between yourself and a beacon, and without moving you'll see a lot of variation between the signal and subsequently how far away it thinks you are. So a lot of our tests have shown about plus or minus 50% is a normal variation on that distance calculation. The signals themselves coming from the iBeacons are very sensitive to the environment around them. So if I take a signal coming from a beacon in a straight line of sight, and then I do the same thing with an obstacle in between us, so a pole or even a person, then that signal will be of a lot lower strength, and again, subsequently that will mean that it thinks I'm a lot further away than I actually am. So that's something to be mindful when developing these kind of apps, is that if you're going to have objects passing between the intended receivers and the emitters, which are the iBeacons, then you will get variances in the distances that it says that you are. As we quickly discussed as well, there's a limited range on these beacons. So even with some of the biggest batteries that you can find, you're probably only going to get a maximum of 50 metres range on these things, and that's an inherent inherent in just the Bluetooth signal itself. So the frequency at which the Bluetooth signal runs means you're not going to get much more coverage than 50 metres. And also as well, from a user point of view, you have to go through a lot of steps to be actually able to interact with the beacon signal. So you have to have an app installed, you have to make sure your Bluetooth switched on, and you also have to allow the security settings to allow the app to use your location. So that's most of the technical stuff done. So I would like to give a few examples now of how the technology has been used to date and what some of the modern applications are. And some of the successes and failures in that. So a big application of the beacon stuff so far has been to do with microlocation. So basically being able to provide a user with more information about their surroundings based on where they are and where their device is. It's primarily been used for passive use, so it's more used in the case where the phone will be locked and in your pocket, and you'll get some sort of notification when you get close enough to a certain region. But if you want, you can also have the apps display some sort of in-app pop-up or notification if the user does want to have the app open and walk around with the beacon data continuously coming in. A lot of the initial applications that were developed for iBeacons were around marketing. So a lot of special offers and limited time discounts were being sent to users that had a particular app. If they walked into a certain range, then they would get notified straight away and say, there's something going on here that you might enjoy. I'm normally one to shy away from the whole marketing side of the beacons, but there are a few applications and a few scenarios where this is quite beneficial to the end user. And keeping in mind that a lot of this stuff is very much opt-in, so it's not as if you're going to get spammed or you're going to get unwanted messages coming up on your phone. You're only going to be subscribed to things that you want to get more information about. So if I have a favourite bakery down the road that has cheap days, or they've got a few sausage rolls that they need to get rid of, I've got their app, I'm walking past their store, I can get a notification saying, we're ready to get rid of some sausage rolls if you can help us out, and I'll be very happy for that. So some of the guys over in the US called Shopkick have an app that basically do this. They've teamed up with a lot of the major retailers over there. So I think they've got Macy's, Target, Levi's Jeans, Sony, amongst a few others. And what they'll do is they'll have people that subscribe to the app and say, yep, I want to get deals from these companies. And so if they're walking down the street or if they're walking through a shopping mall, then they'll get offers and special discounts and things like that if they come in contact with one of these stores. So aside from the marketing stuff, micro-location has been used to great effect for more informational type services. And this stuff's, in my opinion, is really where the technology is heading. So for venues such as galleries, museums, exhibitions and zoos, you can really enrich a user experience by providing location contextual additional information as the user walks around. So for instance, if I'm at a zoo and I'm looking at the echidna display, you'll normally, or historically, you'll have a plaque or something with a bit of information telling you a bit about the animal or the enclosure. If you were to enable a beacon solution to this venue, instead of having a plaque there, you could get a notification as you came near the enclosure, which could then prompt you to open an app. In the app, you could have a whole list of information. You could also then have videos and other multimedia, which is quite difficult to implement as a static display. And all of this happens on the user's own device. So there's no need to invest in any other hardware from the end of the zoo or the location. Sorry, question?
Can I just ask a question on that bit?
Yeah, of course.
Does this mean that I would have to have a gallery app, a zoo app, and an exhibition? So I'd have to have a whole range of apps.
So the question there was, for these examples that I've cited, would you need multiple apps for this information to get passed through, or would there just be like a single app, or would it just run on the operating system? The answer to that is yes, you would need an app for everyone, unless, of course, there was someone that took the initiative to make the iBeacon app that then plugged into all of these other services. But at the moment, there's nothing like that. So one of the best examples to date of this technology and informational services is a place called the Rubens House, which is over in Antwerp in Belgium. And this is a gallery of artworks by some bloke called Ruben, apparently. And what they've done is they've set up all these beacons around the art displays. So from that image there, you might not be able to see it, but that's actually an Estimote beacon that they've used. So each display, which has an iBeacon associated to it, can then trigger a notification or an in-app pop-up in an app that they've built. And this pop-up or notification will give the user more information about the exhibit or the artwork that's in front of them. So they can give things like time and date, location that this art piece was derived, and they can also give extra multimedia. So videos, I think for this particular example, they took X-ray scans of all of the different artworks, And so as you're standing in front of each piece, you can actually view the X-ray version of the art. And essentially what this gives you is the ability to do a self-guided tour throughout the whole exhibit, which is, yeah, very cool. And a lot of other companies and venues have done similar things where they've used the technology to provide that kind of experience where you're able to give yourself a self-guided tour without the need for, you know, grabbing one of those old school handheld devices that gives you the noisy, crackly audio for an hour. Cool. So from the user point of view, obviously there's a lot of cool things you can do with micro-location. But again, there's a side of the business that has to be taken into account. And business intelligence is definitely something of interest to a lot of people. So for things like websites and web pages, there's been a lot of technology for a long time now that allows you to analyse who's coming to your site, how long they've been there for, which sites they jump between, you know, what kind of flow they use. But there hasn't really been something similar for the physical world. So beacons can kind of allow you, well, they can definitely allow you to do that. So I'm, in the previous example for Ruben's house, they could quite easily know how many people enter certain areas, so how many people go and stand in front of certain exhibits and paintings. They can see in which order they naturally progress through the exhibits. And they can also then, well, not particularly for this case, but for things like retail outlets, they can then tie this back to any purchases that were made and get a real idea of how people are using this physical space that they've mapped out. Obviously, this is great for, you know, the marketing teams and the business people that are looking to improve bottom lines and things like that. But it can also be used to great effect to improve user experiences in physical locations. So for the Rubens house, I know that they actually rearranged some of their exhibits based on some of their findings. So they actually saw that a lot of people were viewing the artworks in a way that they weren't expecting. And it was actually taking them a lot longer to get through the exhibit. So they reworked the order of the paintings. And they found that the users much more appreciated that setup. Cool. So one of the second biggest ways that the beacon technology has been adopted to date is through wayfinding. So basically what your GPS does for physical locations, beacons can do on a much smaller scale. So here's an example of a couple of apps that are doing this. One of them is by Meridian. It's a bit fuzzy, this picture, so if you can't see it, I'll try and describe it my best. They've developed this app here, which is basically a GPS for a shopping mall. So if someone comes into the mall and they go, okay, I want to get to Target, how do I best do that? They can plug in Target into the app, and then it will give them a guided waypoint to get to their destination based on where they currently are within the mall. Major League Baseball, this one on the right, they did something similar for a couple of their stadiums over in the US. So they have an app. As you enter the venue, you can enter your ticket number, and it'll actually guide you to where your seat actually is in the venue, which is basically impossible to do with GPS. This is something that's still being trialled, and I think a lot of the stadiums in Australia are now looking at something similar. Anyone that's been to a busy sporting event will know how difficult it is to sometimes find your seat. But if you had an app that could literally take you through step by step and show you turn left here, go up the stairs, turn right, and then this is your aisle, yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff. Just a couple of limitations on the wayfinding stuff though. As I previously mentioned, the signals coming from the beacons are inherently quite noisy. And so determining position based on trilateration algorithms are a bit difficult. So setting up a few beacons, so 2 or 3 beacons and then trying to determine what coordinate someone is based on the distance between all beacons, you're going to get pretty shoddy results just because of the noise of the signal. And so the actual position is going to be quite different, and it's not ideal at the moment. A much better approach to this problem is to set up a grid of beacons. For example, in the example I showed for the Major League Baseball venue, they've actually set up beacons all the way around the stadium, and quite a lot of them actually. So instead of trying to determine where you are based on your distance from numerous beacons, all it will do is say that, okay, I am closest to beacon 1, 2, 3, which therefore puts me in grid space C3. And the way that they've set these things up is to cover as much area as possible, and they know where each beacon is on a floor layout. And this approach is much better in terms of determining where you are. Obviously, it requires a bit more investment and a bit more installation to get this many beacons up, and obviously the more beacons that you have, the better the accuracy of the location you receive. But to date, that's the best solution for large areas. And for all of this stuff, so whether you want to try trilateration or you want to do a grid system, you're still going to need some sort of calibration to make it effective. So you're going to have to install the beacons and get out there with a phone and read the signal strength and get a good idea of what kind of environmental factors might be affecting the signal. Onto some cool stuff. So this particular application, which has been dubbed electronic leashing, is something that's only really become possible with beacon technology. So the last two examples you could sort of do with GPS in certain applications, but this one's brand new. So what this does, what electronic leashing does, is it makes use of the exit ping that you get if you leave a region. So if you get far enough away from the beacon, you'll get this exit notification. So you are able to tell an app to do some predetermined action if you are far enough away from a beacon that you were initially close to. And this is one of the coolest examples of iBeacons I've come across in its 2-year lifespan so far. So Nivea created this campaign called Nivea Sun Kids. Basically what they did is they distributed these little armbands in a magazine which people could tear out. These little armbands had tiny beacons on them, so they emitted the Bluetooth signal. They probably didn't have a great battery life, but they emitted this signal. From what I gather, they had a decent range, so about 20 to 30 metres worth of signal range. And the intention was to place these little armbands on children at the beach. You could then download a Nivea app which would sync to that particular armband. And then if the child was to run off down the beach or to get too far away from the parent, then you'd get a notification on your phone saying that Timmy's run off and you need to go chase him. Or you could actually track in real time how far away they were. Obviously, this was more of a marketing PR type campaign, but there's real companies doing similar things for things like pets and inanimate objects such as wallets and keys and stuff that essentially uses the same technology. Another really cool application that we've come across in our research is electronic locks. So our lovely friend from BitLock who's joined us tonight can testify to some of this, but this particular example, a company called BitLock have made a bicycle lock. It doesn't necessarily run only on iBeacon, but it uses very similar technology, so it runs off the Bluetooth Low Energy. And what it does is it allows you to unlock your bike as you approach it, and also to lock it as you vacate that area as well, I believe. And it basically negates the necessity to either carry around bike lock keys or to remember a combination. That on its own is pretty cool, but one of the other things that this technology can do is allow you to share virtual keys. So if two people have the BitLock app, I can say to my friend, oh, yep, you can borrow my bike for the weekend, no worries, it's down in the garage. I don't have to go and give him a key, I don't have to tell him a combination, I can use the app to send a virtual key. So when his device, when his phone gets near enough to the lock, he's now authorised for that lock to open and he can be on his way. So not only could this be used for sharing with your friends or your family, but it can also set up a whole system of bike sharing or other object sharing that require a lock. Another application that's very similar is UniKey's Kivo product. So basically it's a deadlock that you can put into your doors at home, and in the same way you can sync it to your phone, and using Bluetooth technology and iBeacon technology, if you get close enough to your door, it'll unlock it for you, so you don't need to fumble around with keys. If you've got a handful of shopping, then it'll just open it up for you. And again, you're able to share these virtual keys by sending this virtual information via apps. So things like Airbnb, I believe, will definitely be interested in this technology. I don't think they've come out publicly yet and expressed interest, but if I was to be letting my house out on Airbnb, instead of going and giving keys out continuously to people that were renting the place, I would much prefer to just send a virtual key and let them in using this smart lock. When they leave, I can deactivate that particular key and they're good to go. So yeah, very cool application of iBeacon technology. Just quickly, there's a few security issues or things that just developers need to be aware of when developing apps that incorporate iBeacons. So the iBeacons themselves, the signal that's being constantly emitted is quite easy to sniff. So with a laptop or even an app, I can see the information that's coming out of any iBeacon. It's not encrypted in any way. So this means that other apps can potentially piggyback off any beacons that you've deployed. So potentially another app could find out what signal is being emitted from a beacon and then code that into their app. And so whenever they get close to one of our beacons, they would be able to trigger some sort of action. Also, someone that deploys a beacon could program that beacon to send out the same ID that I'd programmed onto one of mine. The security issues in all of this are going to be minimal for most applications though, because again, you need to download the app for any action to happen. So I would have to download and use the app of anyone that was trying to piggyback off my signals for that to actually become effective. Some beacon manufacturers are now supporting an SDK or a system that allows the IDs that are being sent out to rotate on a weekly or daily basis. For most applications, this might be overkill, but definitely if you're concerned about someone else piggybacking off a beacon and signal that you're sending, then this is a viable solution to that. And just a final security note for anyone looking to develop applications using the iBeacon technology and to deploy their own beacons, it's highly recommended that you don't use the shipping defaults of that beacon. So in the example I gave at the start of the presentation of the Estimote, be sure to change that ID that's being sent out as soon as you get those beacons. That's just because a lot of people won't. So a lot of people will be lazy and they won't change it themselves, and so you'll have a whole heap of these Estimote beacons, or you'll have a whole heap of these Blue Cats beacons that are all just sending out the signal with the default settings. So yeah, simply by changing that default, you're going to make sure that you're not sending out the same signal as someone else. Cool. So a couple of case studies I'll run through quickly. Some of the stuff that we've done at Clip. The first example I gave was the retail outlet that we distributed across 70 stores Australia-wide. This was for Night Owl Convenience. They're a convenience store that are mostly in Queensland. They have a couple in New South Wales, and as I said, one down at Collins Street. So what we did for them, they wanted to be able to show users and customers if there was any daily offers happening that day if they walked by a store. So we set up beacons in these 70 plus locations. We made an app for them, and then if a user then came down the street and a particular store was having an offer that day, so 2-for-1 chips or half price slushies or whatever, then they would be able to get a notification straight onto their lock screen, so they didn't have to have the application open and running. It could just trigger in their pocket, and they would be able to get that information right then and there. So that's quite handy for people that are interested in the daily deals and that kind of stuff. If they were interested, then they could open the notification, and then they would be presented with this screen over here on the right, which would give them more details about the promotion and how they could claim it. It would give them a barcode as well, which they could use to claim this special offer. So during the course of this particular project, there was a few challenges as developers and as a digital solutions provider that we came up against. So a big one was that they required that the deals that were coming through to the devices were live. So for this, we were required to set up a server, so a backend, where they could change at any time what deals were currently available for each store. I think there was a question earlier about this stuff in the background, what actually happens there, and what can you do in that space. So when someone enters a particular region, we only had 10 seconds to actually do anything with the fact that we knew that we're near a store. So we had to make sure that when we were getting these live offers, that the server was quick enough, the connection was going to be able to return, what's today's offer, and get it back down to the phone in time within that 10 seconds. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to display that message. So that was a bit of a tricky one, and basically we just needed to make sure everything was optimized as much as possible on the devices side and also on the web server side for that to happen as quickly as we could make it. Obviously, installing beacons to 70 stores, all of which are franchise stores, so dealing with all these different people was a bit of a hassle to begin with, but giving them a clear set of instructions on how and where to install these things was the best plan of attack for that. So we instructed them to make sure the beacons were placed as close to the front of the store as possible, so that the signal could reach as much of the street in front as it could. And also the battery life as well. We began to see that some of the beacons in the stores lost battery. And up until this point, we weren't able to notice this until someone realised that they weren't getting the notifications anymore. So what we did, we developed a quick tool for them to use and to download from the app stores, which would allow them to check if their beacon's still running and to also get a battery level from the beacon itself. The battery level, unfortunately, isn't stock standard when it comes to the iBeacon message that's being emitted. That's something that has to be sent externally, just via normal Bluetooth by the device. So some devices will give you this, like the Blue Cats did, and I think Estimote also will do this, but most of them won't. So depending on your requirements, if you need to know how the battery is faring, it could dictate which supplier you go with. So despite some of those interesting challenges that we were faced with, we thought we did a really good job in the end with the campaign that we ran for the Night Owl. So we ended up with about 35,000 downloads in the first 3 months. We were able to get into the top 10 of the food and drink category on the app stores. And in the first 12 weeks of the campaigns, we logged 55,000 beacon interactions. So that's people coming into a store, that's people leaving a store. And based on the difference between those two times, you can then interpret how long people were in store. Since there was only one beacon issued per store, we weren't able to break that down any further and to see where people were within one particular retail store, but definitely in future campaigns where they had more beacons allocated, that was definitely possible. Another app that we've made here at Clip is called Find My Things. We got a lot of inspiration from a product called Tile. Some of you might be familiar with this. This is some of the beacons that we use for it, these little white things. We've got quite a few here to give away to anyone that would like one tonight, so please come see me afterwards if you want to help us test these out. So yeah, it's basically a lightweight version of Tile that we've created based on iBeacon technology. So you'll be able to attach these things to your keys, chuck them in your wallet, put them on your luggage, and you'll be able to see how far away they are on an app that we've created. If you lose these things, then it's just a matter of pulling out the app. You'll be able to see straight away whether you're within range of your particular device, with your particular tag, Clip Beacon. And then it's a bit of a game of hot and cold as you walk around and see if you're getting closer or further from these things. And with a bit of time, you can figure out where they are. Unfortunately, beacons don't give you a direction. So you can't say it's 5 metres to your right or 5 metres to your left. You only get the distance signal, which is all you can go off in this sort of application. So some of the interesting challenges we had with this particular one was the hardware selection. So this was one of the ones we went through Alibaba to get our beacons. We went probably through about 15 different providers before we settled on these guys. And yeah, we went through a lot of crappy, unpredictable beacons that might last a week, some last 2 weeks. These ones have been good. They've been running for months now on a single battery, and we're pretty happy with them. And also we've developed a little filtering algorithm that runs on the distances that are given to you from the beacons, just to filter out some of that noise. So instead of oscillating between 10 and 5 metres, we're able to bring that down to a much more accurate reading, just using a few simple filters that we put on them. Just quickly as well on the Find My Things, we do have this app up on the Google Play Store for anyone that's got an Android. We were really hoping to get it on the Apple Store by tonight. It's been awaiting approval for 2 weeks now. So anyone that's submitted an Apple app can probably feel my frustration on this issue. So we're hoping it'll only be a couple more days until that's released, and we'll notify anyone that's interested when that's available, and they can check it out on the App Store. Okay, getting close to the finish now for anyone that's kind of dying. The future of iBeacons, obviously there's a lot of scope left for this technology to grow. It's still quite young, only not even 2 years old yet, so there's a lot of things that can keep progressing. And we've got a couple of predictions that we've come up with. One of the biggest ones will be that the iBeacon technology, along with the Bluetooth Low Energy, will be a cornerstone in the Internet of Things. So IoT there, for anyone unfamiliar with that term. So basically anything around you that's currently inanimate and not smart has the potential to be constantly providing you with information. So I know things like fridges and TVs and washing machines and dryers, they're all starting to become smart devices. And definitely iBeacon has a good place in all of that. A lot of that as well is coupled not only with the Bluetooth side of things, but because beacons are primarily used for communicating between short distances, it acts as a natural security layer between your devices and the rest of the world. So instead of hooking up your dryer to, say, the Wi-Fi and potentially allowing that channel to be attackable by hackers, By using the Bluetooth technology, you've got a natural security gate there that only allows you to connect with devices within a certain region. We definitely think that Apple and hopefully Android as well will continue investing in the technology, so improving the distance calculations that we currently get, and also the overall reliability of the Bluetooth low energy. Cool. Just a final note as well. You've seen what's involved for a user to actually use the technology. So they need to download an app, they need to make sure their Bluetooth is on, they need to make sure location services are enabled. So it's really important if anyone's thinking of developing one of these apps that's iBeacon enabled, is that they give the user a real reason to go through all that trouble to actually download the app and to basically use it. It's not a given that you get a golden ticket straight to the user's device by using this solution. So you really have to focus on providing real value to the final user. And that's about it. There's been a couple of questions throughout, which has been great. If anyone else has any questions about technology, about anything else, happy to answer them.
You mentioned several times one of the challenges here is getting people to download the app.
Mm-hmm.
About how big is a Bluetooth app? And the reason for the question is that, for example, a sporting club here might say, why don't we embed the app to help you find your seat into our sporting apps so that when you go to a game at several different stadiums, etc., we can help you find your seat. Is that a practical solution, or are these apps does it just make a big app even bigger?
That's a great question. To incorporate the Beacon technology into an existing app is basically negligible in terms of the amount of data required for it. It's super lightweight. You could write the functionality, in 100 lines of code nearly. You don't need any extra resources in terms of the phone itself. So that's definitely a viable solution for some of these companies and some of these venues. They might already have existing apps, and all they need to do now is just to incorporate this module into it, which is extremely lightweight. Yes?
I'm just thinking in terms of people who might have sensory, people who are blind, for example, and being able to locate things or know exactly when. Have you had any examples like that?
For accessibility type issues, not as such. There's so many going on now. It's really taken a good year, I think, for the wheels to start getting any traction in this technology. Because it wasn't touted as the next big thing by Apple or anything, developers, I think, were a bit reluctant to start going that direction. So no, I don't know of anything at the moment, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's 100 companies already exploring that as an application, just because there's so much going on. Any final questions? Awesome. Thank you very much for listening to me tonight. It's been a pleasure.
We people at iMug absolutely love a message like that on a screen. We actually love presents. So thank you very much. I think the progression through all the components of iBeacons, the fact of Apple's involvement, the evolution of them, the problems still to face. Without problems, it'd be very boring, wouldn't it?
It would be.
But you can see the potential is very much there. So, again, thank you, Chris, and your colleagues coming. The bicycle app, you'd be happy to talk about, perhaps informally. Tyson would also be happy to continue the discussion informally as well, and the invitation is there before you leave. Now, tonight we're not going on with any further presentation, but you're very welcome to stay and have some coffee or some tea. Can I just mention that next month, Rob Crocker is going to give his version of iMovie. Now, Rob makes it quite clear he is not an expert. He has been self-taught, but he has produced some very good films on his travels. So Rob will be coming next month, and we also invite anyone who is also interested in iMovie, but not only iMovie, to also be part of the presentation. And Les wants to say something about that.
Thanks, Ian. I'm going to talk to camera because this is going to go to YouTube. So we're inviting our iMug members in the second half of the program after the main presentation. If they want to do a 12 or 13-minute little presentation about a favourite app, whether it be on the iOS or the Mac OS, whether it be something about their Apple experience, whether it be something about the purchase they've made of a new piece of hardware or a peripheral that would be of interest to the general membership, we'll invite that. Next month will also be after the Worldwide Developers Conference, so it's possible that our friend Gary Barker may attend there, and we'll have a brief interview with him about what he discovered there and the future for Apple. So we are thinking that each presenter for those things will get an iTunes card of some description to go off and download some apps as a gift from iMug for putting themselves forward to their peers. So again, thank you very much, Tyson and your team, and stick around now and have some supper and discuss things Mac. Thanks everyone.